The first time Delilah Thornfield threatened to have people arrested for singing Christmas carols, I honestly thought I was looking at some kind of seasonal mental break, not an HOA dispute. She came stomping down our street with a stack of cease and desist letters in her arms like she was delivering judgments from the mountain, shouting that our neighborhood Christmas party was an illegal gathering and anybody who showed up would be fined, arrested, humiliated, whatever word made her feel powerful that day. And standing there in that sharp December air, with frost cracking under her boots and the whole street smelling more like anger than pine, I had one very clear thought. This woman had finally gone too far. For 15 years, the families in our subdivision had gathered on December 23rd in Joe and Linda Kowalski's backyard. Nothing fancy, nothing wild. Just kids singing off-key Christmas songs, parents passing around cookies and cocoa, older neighbors getting one good warm night of company before the deep cold of winter settled in. It was one of those traditions that made a place feel human, which, of course, meant Delilah hated it. By then, she'd already spent months turning Oak Ridge Estates into her own little paper dictatorship. Basketball hoops were visual blight. Chalk drawings were property defacement. Holiday decorations were aesthetic violations. One family got threatened because their flag brushed a tree branch. Another because their kids' toys were apparently destroying property values. Every week there was another letter, another fine, another door knock, another speech about standards and order and the kind of people she claimed were dragging the neighborhood down. And what she did not know, the detail that makes this whole thing almost too perfect to be real, was that every complaint she filed, the city landed on my desk. My name is Ethan Wellington. I was the mayor of Maplewood Heights. Though in that neighborhood, I was just Ethan from the corner house, husband to Sarah, father of twin girls, the guy who waved from the driveway and took his trash cans in on time. I liked it that way. After years in public life, the anonymity felt like oxygen. My neighbors knew I worked downtown. They did not know I ran the town. Delilah definitely didn't know. For 6 solid months, she'd been filing official complaints with my office, demanding I investigate my own street, my own neighbors, and eventually, without knowing it, me. The morning I saw her newest message in my inbox, I nearly spit coffee across my laptop. She was asking the city to stop illegal neighborhood meetings and undesirable social activity on my own block, my neighbors, my daughter's friends. That was the moment the thing changed for me. Up until then, I'd watched, documented, waited. After that, I got personal. 3 nights later, nearly every family in the subdivision was crammed into Joe Kowalski's garage. It smelled like sawdust, cold metal, burnt coffee, and fear. Papers were being passed around, people talking low, like we were planning a resistance movement instead of a Christmas party. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher in her 70s, held up a citation for an oversized wreath. Tom Rodriguez, a Vietnam veteran, showed us the warning Delilah had sent over his flag. One young mother was crying because Delilah had threatened to call child services over toys in the yard. You sit in a room like that long enough, you learn something ugly about power. Give the wrong person a title, a printer, and a little room to intimidate people, and they start to believe cruelty is administration. So I made a decision. Ethan the neighbor would stay quiet a little longer. Ethan the mayor would start building the trap. That night, after Sarah went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table and started digging into the HOA's legal status. I had a feeling, the kind you get from years of dealing with bureaucrats and petty tyrants, that Delilah was bluffing with paperwork she barely understood. Turns out I was right. The HOA's corporate registration had lapsed more than 2 years earlier. Their licensing was out of date. Their authority to issue fines was, in practical terms, smoke in a cheap blazer. She had been terrorizing 47 families with documents that meant exactly nothing. The next step was easy. I filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office. Then I did something I'm still not proud of, though I'm not exactly sorry either. Around 2 in the morning, in a hoodie, like a middle-aged suburban raccoon. I slipped copies of public records and state HOA requirements into every mailbox in the neighborhood. No note, no signature, just highlighted sections showing Delilah didn't have the legal standing she claimed. The timing was beautiful. Neighbors woke up to the truth. The same morning, Delilah got notice that the state was reviewing her HOA. I watched from my kitchen window as she opened that letter, and I swear I saw the blood leave her face from 50 yards away. That should have slowed her down. It didn't. It made her meaner. She sent out certified letters threatening $500 fines for attending the Christmas party. She demanded a special $300 HOA assessment to fund her legal defense. She installed cameras aimed at the Kowalski's house. She called in complaint after complaint to the city, every one more paranoid than the last. At one point, she even locked the neighborhood mailbox cluster and somehow had the streetlights shut off, which meant older residents were stumbling around in the dark just trying to get medication and mail. That part caught my attention in a different way. Her assessment notices claimed the HOA paid for lighting, snow removal, and road maintenance. But city records showed we already provided all of that through normal municipal services. In plain English, she'd been charging residents for things their taxes were already paying for. I dug deeper and found years of duplicate billing. The total was ugly. Enough to be fraud, not sloppiness. I tipped off a local reporter. Then I filed a records request under my own name as a citizen, just to get the paper trail moving in daylight. When the first news segment aired that Friday night, the neighborhood practically stopped breathing. There it all was on television: duplicate fees, bogus assessments, questions about vendor payments, residents holding letters they'd been too scared to challenge. By Saturday, people from other neighborhoods were reaching out with their own HOA horror stories. Mrs. Patterson turned her living room into a legal research bunker. Tom and the other veterans started escorting elderly neighbors who were afraid to walk alone. Maria Santos offered her restaurant's back room for meetings. The whole subdivision changed tone in about 48 hours. Fear turned into momentum. And Delilah went from tyrant to cornered animal. She hired a private investigator who started photographing families. He showed up at soccer games. He took pictures of license plates. One morning I saw him aiming a camera toward the school bus stop, where my daughters were standing in little knit hats with their backpacks on. That was the moment my patience ended. An HOA war is one thing. You point a camera at my kids, now you've changed the nature of the conversation. Then she made the mistake that truly buried her. She tried to bribe my building inspector. Jake Morrison called me laughing so hard he could barely get the words out. Delilah had offered him cash to fabricate code violations on homes in our neighborhood. She promised him influence, promotions, city protection, all of it imaginary, all of it stupid. She had no idea she was trying to recruit one of my own employees into a criminal conspiracy against my own neighbors while claiming my support. I filed charges that afternoon. Around the same time, Mrs. Patterson made a discovery that cracked the whole thing open. Her late husband had kept 30 years of HOA records in bankers' boxes in his home office. Buried in all that paper was the original charter. It made one thing very clear. Delilah had never had the power to act alone the way she had. Board approval was required for enforcement actions. Resident consent was required for fee increases. She had spent 6 years ruling like a one-woman monarchy with no legal basis for half of what she'd done. Then we found the part that made my hands go cold. She had secretly mortgaged community property, the playground, clubhouse, common areas, without proper approval. $47,000 in hidden debt, all to finance her campaign against the people who actually owned those spaces together. That was no longer petty HOA abuse. That was fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft dressed up as neighborhood governance. At that point, I contacted federal authorities. Mail fraud, wire fraud, bribery, financial misconduct, harassment, stalking involving children. Once the paper trail was laid out, The interest came fast. Sarah was the first person in the neighborhood I told the full truth to. We were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, the girls upstairs doing homework, and I finally said out loud, Delilah had spent 6 months filing complaints directly to the mayor, and the mayor was me. Sarah just stared at me for a second, then asked the only question that really mattered. When do you end this? I could have ended it quietly. I could have had her picked up on a Tuesday morning, out of sight, no drama, no public reckoning. But after what she'd done to those families, after the threats, the lies, the surveillance, the fear she'd poured into that neighborhood like poison, quiet felt wrong. Some people need to be stopped. Some people need to be seen being stopped. So I chose the Christmas party. By then, Delilah was fully detached from reality. She was calling employers, accusing neighbors of criminal conspiracy. She was sending notes threatening grandparents. She was begging authorities to stop what she called organized holiday terrorism. The more she talked, the more evidence she created. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so ugly. The afternoon of December 23rd, she stationed herself at the entrance to the subdivision with a folding table, homemade signs, and a clipboard, like some deranged border guard for a gated kingdom nobody respected anymore. News crews arrived. Police arrived. Federal agents positioned themselves quietly. Families kept coming anyway, carrying trays of cookies, casseroles, folding chairs, wrapping paper, strings of lights. Kids ran past her like she was weather. By 3:30, the Kowalski's backyard looked exactly the way it should have all along. Warm lights in the trees, steam coming off cider, children laughing, older folks bundled in coats, people hugging in that awkward winter way where everybody's sleeves get in the way. The whole place smelled like cinnamon, pine, chocolate, and relief. Then Delilah lost whatever was left of her mind. She started shouting at families as they walked in. She accused Tom Rodriguez of corrupting minors. She screamed at Mrs. Patterson over cookies. Then she saw my daughters coming toward the yard with Sarah and pointed at them in front of police, cameras, neighbors, everybody. Those are the children of the criminal mastermind, she yelled. Arrest them. That did it. I stepped forward to the crowd while the carolers behind me kept singing, soft and shaky and perfect. Delilah was still waving papers, still demanding the mayor come deal with this, still drunk on the fantasy that real power belonged to her. I stopped about 15 feet away and said very calmly, Ma'am, I'm Ethan Wellington, and I'm exactly who you've been asking for. She frowned at me. I asked for the mayor. I am the mayor. I have seen people receive bad news before. I've seen shock, grief, panic, rage. What crossed her face in that moment was all of it at once. It was like watching a building realize it had no foundation. I showed my identification. Then I told her, in front of everyone, that for 6 months she had been filing complaints asking me to investigate myself for protecting my neighbors from her illegal harassment. I told her every fake fine, every threatening letter, every false complaint, every bribe attempt, every act of surveillance had been documented. I told her the HOA was being dissolved. I told her the community property mortgage had been uncovered. I told her real authority protects people. It does not terrorize them. Then the city attorney stepped forward with the dissolution papers, and a federal agent stepped forward with handcuffs. When they cuffed her, the kids behind me were singing Silent Night. I'm not a poetic man by nature, but I'll admit it. That sound did something to me. The woman who tried to criminalize Christmas was led away while children sang under lights she'd threatened to sight in a yard she tried to shut down. Surrounded by the very families she thought fear would keep obedient. The whole crowd broke into applause, not for me, not really, but for the simple fact that the nightmare was over. The party went on for hours after that. And here's the thing I carried away from it all. Bullies love isolation. They need people scared, tired, embarrassed, divided. The minute decent people start comparing notes, standing together, and checking the paperwork, the whole act begins to collapse. By the new year, The neighborhood had formed a voluntary community association with real transparency and zero appetite for tyrants. Kids played outside again. Mrs. Patterson started hosting coffee mornings. The Christmas party became bigger the next year, not smaller. That may be my favorite part of the whole story. Delilah tried to make the neighborhood afraid to gather, and all she really did was remind everybody why gathering mattered. So let me ask you something. When someone hides behind rules, titles, and fake authority to control other people, where do you think the line is between enforcing order and becoming a bully? And if you've ever dealt with a person like that in your own neighborhood, workplace, or family, tell me what happened. Because I don't think stories like this end until people stop staying quiet.